Hello everybody, welcome to the latest edition of the Coaching Conversation. In this series, we're aiming to help business owners, business leaders and fellow coaches by sharing our experience and the experience of our guests who've coached people all around the world in all of different sectors and industries that you can imagine. So very little more to say other than do please now sit back, relax and enjoy this edition, and look out for a special offer for our loyal audience at the end of the programme. Hello everybody and welcome to yet again another edition of the Coaching Conversation. Today I am joined by Maxine Mackie, all the way from Edinburgh, to talk about navigating the tech landscape and in particular artificial intelligence. Maxine, you do this for a lot of business owners, a lot of business leaders, and I have to say, as a business owner, I am as confused as anybody else is. So I'm really personally looking forward to this chat. So perhaps introduce yourself to the audience, explain to them who you are and what you're doing now.
Fab. Thank you so much, Graham, and thrilled to be here with you today. So my background has been in tech consulting, and I've always been kind of a focused and obsessed with the what and how of innovation, and really only did first of a kind products. So that was when we were essentially looking at emerging technologies and trying to kind of build new things in the kind of the most impactful way. And typically I've always worked with really large organizations around the world. And from the kind of a tech consulting background, I then kind of doubled down and focused on kind of innovation advisory work through Market Gravity, an agency that was part of the Deloitte network. So I've had a lot of experience in the kind of a big consulting and big four world, but always was obsessed with this idea of like disrupting the advisory space. So founded a business called Label Sessions with my co-founder, Nick Sherrod. And what we're trying to do is we built an incredible expert innovation network that's really full of incredible pioneers from around the world. And what we do is really try and focus on how do we make progress happen at our clients. So I've built the system, built the processes, and kind of deliver projects in that way where we bring in expert advisors to kind of either deliver accelerators, or which are like innovation projects, or kind of a one-on-one expert advice sessions. So that's kind of a bit around kind of what I'm doing now.
What would a typical client be for you?
Well, I don't think there's a typical client, if I'm honest, because we work with, tech leaders, people leaders, design leaders, creative leaders, CEOs and COOs. But I think the thread that holds them together is really this kind of a similarity of this desire to make progress happen. So they're normally quite progressive people that they want to bring in advice, but to either kind of augment their team or to push thinking in a particular direction. And so typically, I think they've always got big ambitions. They're typically quite progressive, sometimes mavericks who want to make change happen in their organization, but it could be across a different field. What we find is, even when you're thinking about tech advisory and new product development, that could come from, it doesn't have to necessarily be with a technology leader. We're actually doing a huge amount of really kind of innovative and using emerging tech for a lot of marketing leaders right now.
And if you look at the individual business leaders, potential clients that you're working with, and you talk about them having an ambition to change their organization, how it does business and so on, is there another trait behind that? Is it because they're curious? Is it because they're ambitious, or is it they're frightened by competition? What might be the common background?
I think curiosity and progressiveness are quite positive words. And I think there's definitely a part of that. But most leaders are targeted with growth of some kind. So I think it's around, where is growth going to come from? Where is our right to play? And I think there is so I guess I actually probably think, Graham, about two things when you say that, when you position that. It's about curiosity is really important, but I think some of our clients actually also, they're managing their day jobs, they're trying to make progress happen, and it's hard to do in a big organization. So I think it's like being curious, progressive, but there's also what makes a great client. And sometimes it's a maverick, it's someone who understands how to navigate their organization, but what levers to pull to make change happen. So I think curiosity is a big one. Openness is also a big one, because I think it's openness to new things, new ideas, but the ability to tie that back into the history of an organization. I think when a lot of people go into work with clients, they treat it like a blank slate, that people have never thought about these ideas before, or they've never tried to do it before. And just as before any client engagement, even, you know, when I was cutting my teeth at IBM as a kind of a young consultant, I'd always read the company report and try and like understand the wider strategy, because that doesn't give you the history, but it gives you an insight of where they're going. And I think that loop of understanding what's happened, the ability to ask questions, but a really great client is one that's able to help you navigate that history of the organization. So I don't know if that answers your questions, but they're the
But
things that I would probably call out.
definitely getting there. And would a typical client be an SME? Would it be a big corporate? What? And I appreciate you can do both, but what would be more of your focus these days?
So we typically work with big corporates. So it could be FTSE, kind of a 200 companies, global companies. There are kind of a typical client base. To be honest, I've worked with a lot of that kind of a type of size of organization, even from working at IBM and Deloitte and Market Gravity. So they're typically who we work with. But it's not to say that within those big corporate organizations there aren't small ventures that they're essentially treated like a startup within that organization. So that's a big client group that we work with. But we also work with partner organizations like FinTech Scotland and other kind of community organizations whose remit is to really drive startups and fintech growth across the UK and beyond. So I would say it's typically corporates. We're always working with them, but also sometimes kind of partner organizations like fintech communities, things like that.
So am I right in assuming that the gap that you fill for these people is you have a maverick or you have someone who's looking to drive change, and they're looking for someone who helps that turn into a reality, make rubber meet the road? These are your technical opportunities that are available to you given a view of the landscape. Is that where you guys fit in?
Yeah, for sure. It's a bit broader than that too, rather than just technology. Sometimes I find that technology is a driver within, or an element within kind of any of our projects. So we often so we work with clients in two ways at Label Sessions. So through accelerator projects and programs. So that's where it's like 6 to 12 weeks and it's a project and we've got a real focus. So it could be around where's growth going to come from. It could be around new product development or what's our kind of a technical strategy. So sometimes it's that kind of a 6 to 12 week type of engagement, or we access the expert network directly. So we're working with a kind of a major UK bank right now, and they're doing a huge amount of kind of a technical transformation. So we'll bring in experts to support them across different touch points of their kind of a technical transformation journey. So we kind of will work with clients in those two different ways. And often I think running an accelerator project then becomes quite an ongoing relationship to access our innovation network, because there's a huge amount of kind of a coaching opportunities for individuals to talk to people firstly outside of their network about, and it could be, so it's interesting when we talk about kind of a coaching around the kind of a, even with thinking about like technology and like technology leaders, sometimes you want a peer in a different industry to understand what they're doing and how they're doing. So we'll set up a lot of expert conversations around that, almost like a peer-to-peer conversation. But sometimes you want to talk to somebody that has a really the same role as you, but in a totally different location. So if we think about fintech, what's going on in Singapore, what can someone from, a London fintech or a London bank understand from there? So we kind of look at that and try and we always curate really interesting kind of panels or conversations for technology leaders. And it also could just be about a very deep technical thing that they want to have enough knowledge that they can answer any question that their board gives them or their boss gives them or their colleagues give them. And so it's a real mix of kind of a deep technical knowledge versus kind of the challenges someone's facing in a similar role. And as a producer at Label Sessions, it's such a pleasure to curate those type of conversations and understand what does somebody really need. So that's that kind of a coaching mindset of what do you want to do? What are you looking to achieve? And who are the right people we can connect you with to empower you?
So at label sessions, and you in particular, Maxine, are you, you describe yourself as a curator. Are you more of a facilitator than an implementer? Is that more of the role?
So no, I probably do a bit of both. So I'll run programs of work. So with kind of a financial service organizations where I kind of done a lot of work. So we run projects and produce them. So lead them. But also, if some of our clients will have a project ongoing with us. So to bring it to life, we were working with a global travel technology company on a huge program of work. And it came up in conversation that they were struggling with naming a product. And so they had a creative block, the team. They had a name in their defense, but their legal team blocked it, which created a huge creative block. So what we did is we accessed our kind of innovation expert network. And that's an example where I would curate the right people to input into something and then produce the output and share it back to the client. So it's a mix of both. And I think I'm having led digital transformation projects, done a lot of new product development, and having kind of done a lot of that work and work kind of across industry in my kind of consulting and kind of venture studio days, having done that, it puts me in a great position to understand the challenges individuals facing if we're trying to then curate the right people for them to talk to. And it's also, I think, about asking them the right questions. And I think you need a lot of experience to be able to do that.
Yeah. Teasing out the reality of the problem for everybody to understand is it's a real coaching skill, is that? Do you find there's a series of underlying themes for your clients, the challenges that they're facing? And if so, what would they typically be?
So I think often we're getting really big questions. So how might we use technology to do a new thing? And this could be anything from how can we kind of understand and manage like operational risk to how do we create customer experiences that our customers want, because so many businesses are struggling with that because consumers are a really fickle bunch. I'm sure you're similar to me, where the last great digital experience you have is the one you suddenly overnight expect everywhere. So then when your bank doesn't do something, you're like, what is going on? This is so archaic. So I think there is a sense of the challenges we face is they're always trying to do a thing. And sometimes it's where's growth going to come from? It's new product development. How are we going to operate our business? And so it's normally the thread is like a big challenge. And then we have a framework and a process to kind of break that down into really manageable chunks. And that's quite an important thing, because if you break something down, and we've got a kind of a methodology to do it, it very much kind of you can kind of focus, finish, and move on. You can take the insight you need from a stage and then move on. And I think that's really what helps make progress happen. And then the other thing is, I guess, that a lot of challenges our clients are facing around how do we open up our organization to work with others. So that could be startups, it could be fintech. So we often get asked for a lot of help running accelerator labs and accelerator programs, and often with partnerships teams at big organizations who have this real desire to work with startups and fintechs, but are just working through how to do this. So we provide them a lot of, I would say, innovation coaching around these are ways to approach it, but really trying to tie it back to what their focus is and what they're doing, and kind of talk them through different frameworks that they can use and how they can apply partnerships. Because I think partnerships are a really interesting element of technology and technology delivery, because I think big organizations and technology leaders and beyond need to really think about what they build, what they buy, and who they partner with, because you don't have to build everything in-house. It's probably not effective use of like technology teams anyway. And that becomes, I think, more of a pressing issue when you think about the growth of emerging technology. And if you think about it on a personal level, that's like people banging on the CIO or the CTO's door saying, why can't I do this? Why are you blocking this tool? Can I use this to do my job? I want to try this.
Yeah.
So I think there's a real sense of energy when it's positive, but also it could be technology leaders can be a bit bombarded by asks from their colleagues and their peers across the business around doing things differently. So I think that's a big challenge that kind of most technology leaders face.
And I think the point about collaborating and finding partners is interesting because obviously at the same time there are security issues. There's all sorts of other dynamics
sure.
at play depending on the sector and so on. I'm a bit frightened about asking the next question because I could be taking the lid off of Pandora's box, but we've got to go there because it was in the promise we made to the audience at the beginning. We talked about helping them navigate artificial intelligence, and here we go, we're there now. How does that feature for you now? And I appreciate it's an enormous landscape and it's moving at the speed of light. I understand that, but for you guys, how is that featuring?
So I'm glad we can kind of dig into this because I think it's a really interesting topic because in some sense, AI, Gen AI is kind of everywhere. So I was just speaking at Money 2020 last week in Amsterdam, and you could see AI discussions, AI companies are everywhere. So first of all, people are saturated with hearing it. It's so overhyped in the kind of a business media about using it. So that's kind of a first thing. So there's a bit of a lesson in kind of it's totally overhyped. How are we using it? Firstly, the underlying data is really important for AI, especially if you're building your own large language models, because the quality of the data is kind of a bit dependent on the quality of the output. And I guess, how do we help our clients navigate this emerging technology and AI landscape? So we do it by, I think, firstly, we have to humanize everything. You have to ask the right questions. So there's no point talking about the technology and like different products that they can use, whether it's ChatGPT or kind of even like meeting recording analytics, things like that. There's no point talking about that and the detail in the weeds. You really need to focus the conversation on what are you trying to do and what are you trying to and why are you trying to do it. And I think humanizing it is really important. And if they don't have like, the right, like a strategy of things of what they're trying to do, that's something that we typically will then step in and help them with that too, before you kind of go into like a build mode. And it's interesting with the progression of SaaS tools, the barrier to entry with a lot of technology products, including AI, is really low. And I'd actually suggest that the role of prototyping is probably now a bit redundant. And I think it's probably on the back foot when you can kind of go straight into build and test mode for a lot of organizations. And I think then you need that mindset shift away from prototyping is make it real as quickly as possible so you can learn the bits that you need to really double down on and fix that are wonky. And also, what are your hypotheses, and actually truly test that? And are we right on this? Are we not right on this? So I think that's kind of a one big part. I think AI is creating a huge amount of opportunities, and we're seeing this come in not just with tech clients, we're seeing it come in not just with technology clients, but with a lot of, say, more like COOs and marketeers as well. And they're looking, so an interesting example of how kind of the clients are navigating AI, and this is just a small one, and very much a first step for kind of I think listeners to be aware of and maybe think about how they can use it in their kind of roles, is we're working with marketing clients to look at how we can use Gen AI to create design prompts to navigate against the unconscious bias that a lot of design teams have. And that's a way in which you're kind of I guess the AI is a bit of a co-pilot in the design process in a marketing kind of a project where it's creating prompts for the teams to then kind of create around and review. So that's kind of one way to do it. I think that's really curious, especially when we think about the diversity of teams and the diversity of thoughts. So that's one way in which kind of I think practically AI I think is quite interesting. And then even like brand guidelines. So testing out brand guidelines using Gen AI to then understand how where teams need to really focus on and do the most work. And I think I wanted to tell this aspect to the story of some of the work that we're doing, because it's not necessarily with a technology team, it's with a marketing team, it's with a creative team, and it's actually how they're using tech tools. Also doing some work right now with a very, very storied fintech leader who has kind of exited their super successful fintech, and they've set up a kind of a drinks brand with a partner, which was quite curious. It was quite an adjacent leap for him, but they're using AI to drive the brand and business development. And he actually said something to me really interesting the other day about AI. And we were talking about something else, and he basically was saying traditional search like Google is becoming really obsolete for him, and he uses Gen AI instead and AI tools, and he does it to create a richer dialogue than, say, traditional search questions. And I think that's, again, a really interesting use of an individual, like kind of a moving away from traditional search, which if you don't search for the right thing, you're not going to get the right answer. So I think there's really a huge amount of opportunity for AI. I think there are a huge amount of tools that exist that people can play with. And what's interesting about that is maybe like 15 years ago or so, even like, and far kind of before that, there was a real barrier to engaging with technology. So sometimes that was only technology leaders and technology leads in big organizations that had access to technology. Now we all do, and we're probably using it in our personal lives as much as we are, if not more, than our working lives. And so I think there's a huge opportunity for companies to use AI and other emerging tech. And I think that is not just in technology teams, it's across the business. But my only word of warning, I've been quite positive because I am quite excited about all the new technology. But for AI to be really effective for big organizations, it needs data to compute. So I think the quality of data is now at the forefront, and it's really, especially if you're kind of building your own language models or your own tools, that baseline shouldn't be overlooked. So I think it's really interesting, and I'm seeing loads too around the accelerator labs that we run around bringing in AI in particular, very specifically, because there are some incredible use cases. So if you think about, we did an innovation call earlier in the year around simplifying compliance around financial regulation, and AI is perfect because it's got the ability to compute a huge amount of information, i.e. all the regulation that exists, and the regulator creates regulations not necessarily in one bubble, but it's multiple teams, and sometimes the regulation is a bit at odds with each other. But something like AI can be really helpful to, if you say input in an organization's risk appetite, their position, things like that, you can then look at scale what kind of regulations apply to your business, and also what it's the next step of what are your obligations and what are you going to do next with that. So I think things like that are a huge asset to organizations. And so I think AI is really interesting for creative processes, managing against some of our unconscious bias and helping us kind of be better practitioners, and then also really practical solutions. And it'll be even more interesting with all the ESG regulations and the stuff coming from government and FCA on how big companies report not just on their own kind of ESG regulatory commitments, but their supply chain. So it's perfect for computing huge amounts of data.
Yeah,
and I think people need help with it.
Just to share with you, my experience across my client base, or our client base, is very similar. AI seems to have prompted a more openness of thought, possibly a level of ambition, perhaps at a step with reality, but it's created a desire or a curiosity around what technology can do for them that is perhaps much more now than it was before. And allied with that is, if I don't, somebody else might, and I might get left behind. So there's a fear factor of competitive edge. I'm just conscious that you've used a couple of terms during the conversation that not all of the audience would necessarily understand. Could you?
Naughty me.
It's an idiot's guide to a long language model, and you call it GenAI, generative AI. Can you just describe the two and any other forms of AI that are out there in
So,
terms?
so what I would say around Gen AI is the ability to create new output from a request. So it's generating something, and so AI typically before would be computing information, but this is generating the answers. So ChatGPT through OpenAI launched last year, and I think it had the highest downloads of any kind of a new product and service ever. I think it like bust like all the league tables, and it's been a really powerful tool because what it does is it computes essentially, I would call it the internet, but like as somebody who's a true specialist might be more specific than that, but all the information that exists that's online, that's digital. And what it does differently is it will kind of generate answers. So I could type in a request, so create a covering letter for my CV for this company in this tone of voice, and it would generate that for me automatically. I could say, create 10 design prompts that help a team think about X differently in Y industry to do something else. And it's the ability to then generate the answers to what you're saying. And I think ChatGPT is a large language model, and what that's meaning is it's I don't know if I'm doing a very good job of explaining this,
So far,
but
so good.
it's basically the large language model is the driver to create that text. So when I use that example of create design prompts, it's a large language model that's driving that. And the model is, I guess, the internet of words, and then the AI is picking the right ones, and it's actually doing it by understanding. It's like, when I think about this, it's quite wild. The AI doesn't necessarily understand like the meaning of each word, but it understands the placement of words together, and that's where the context and meaning is. And it's basically just a neural network of the connections of language.
Just coming back to your work with clients, you mentioned 6 to 12 week projects. Do you have other kinds of involvement? How long would a project perhaps last for you with the client? I know you might do lots of work with the client off and on, off and on,
Yeah.
off and on, but a particular assignment, what might that be?
So maybe let me talk you through a couple of examples. So often, if we're working with a new client, it will be a 6 to 12 week accelerator project on a thing, whether it's where's growth going to come from, what's our brand strategy, what's our tech strategy. So we do those projects, and quite purposefully, they're time boxed because we've got quite a structured, a tried and trusted methodology that helps us progress those really big questions and to translate that into an answer that the business really understands and could get behind. So typically we work with them. Sometimes we do back-to-back projects, but we really try and stay disciplined and time box them to that. Doesn't always work that way, but that's really how we like to work. We do other things. So sometimes we have longer ongoing relationships with clients where they have a subscription to the innovation network, and that comes in two ways. So the first one is it's just ongoing access. So they might have a question that they want a really specific answer to. This is where the power of our the breadth of our innovation expert network comes into play, because it could be around a bank wants to do some more, wants to explore their, open banking strategy version 5, like, I don't know, 7-10 years after regulation came into play, and we'll bring in experts for them. So it could be an expert a week across a period of time that they set, but that's a bit how long is a piece of string. But we also do a leadership development programs. Typically they're in 6-week cycles where you have somebody that's selected to be part of the leadership development program at their organization. We will understand what their ask is. Then we create a brief from that and commission out to our label mates. We're really picking the right person to have the right conversation with. And then they'll have those conversations. And then often there's a period of reflection. So we might have a series of conversations around 3 weeks, and then a reflection period of about 2 weeks, and then create some assets from that in the last week. So that could be a one-pager takeaway. We've done podcasts, we've even done magazines and other assets and things that leaders can choose to share, to keep to themselves, to share with the world on social media, or to share with their team or their boss, that type of thing. So projects, normally 6 to 12 weeks. Leadership development programs, normally in 6-week cycles. And then subscriptions are kind of a very kind of a tailored to the client ask.
Got it. What is it gives you personally the most satisfaction from working with your clients?
I just want to make great products that are like good for people and good for the world. And I think I also get to work with some incredible people. So we've built an innovation expert network with some amazing folk that have done amazing things around the world. And I just feel like that totally energizes me. I think there are incredible things happening, and just to kind of have a touch point into it and get a sense of people's careers and what they've done and how they've cultivated their craft is just amazing. And then I think the other part of it is when you support progressive clients, and I think that, and it's that curiosity we talked about earlier, I think, and being somebody that's progressive and wants to make change happen, they make change happen and you get to be a part of it. And that's amazing. So I think there's this like network effect that's super empowering, working in that kind of a collaborative environment. And just to get a sense of that kind of we're all kind of we're more than the sum of our parts type of thing. So I think that's, for me, there's great joy in that. I've always just loved the kind of a first of a kind, like trying to translate new technology to new products and services that people need. And then to do it, it's great. To see it out in the world is a pleasure. And to do it with people that I think are kind of a like-minded, such a joy. Why not?
Exactly. Why not? Maxine, thank you very much for your time today. If anybody in the audience wants to hear more, wants to reach out to you, where can they find you?
So I chat about innovation things on LinkedIn and label sessions things. So you can find me there, or you can go to labelsessions.com.
Thanks, Maxine. Thanks for your time. Well, that's it, everybody. See you again next time. Bye. So there you have it, the latest edition of the Coaching Conversation. Hope you enjoyed it, hope you found it useful, and I hope it did what it set out to do. As promised at the beginning of the programme, here is a special offer for you, our loyal audience. If you reach out to me at gwiley@sagegreen.com and mention this podcast, we'll make available to you a coaching programme for you and or your team at a 50% discount. So where can you reach us? So it's definitely gwiley@sagegreen.com. You can also reach us at the executive mindset at sagegreen.com, and our website is clearly theexecutivemindset.co.uk. If you enjoyed this, do please leave us with a wonderful rating on Google. We'd really appreciate that. So nothing more for me to say now other than see you again soon.